Thank you, everybody, for registering and attending. My name's Hilda Gann, and I welcome you to COVID-19 Tough Decisions for Business Owners. Today's session is called Impacts of Remote Work. Right now, on your screen, or if you don't see it, there's a pop-up menu either at the top or the bottom of your computer screen. You can participate in the poll. I have eight people who've signed up for the poll. I'll give it just a few more seconds and then I will close the poll and show you the results. We're asking people who are participating to tell us if you have staff regularly working remotely prior to COVID-19, and have you transitioned your work remotely since the changes required, and if you can answer those. So I'm going to end the poll now so we can get some results. So here are the results. For the question number 1, 22% said yes, most of the staff had already worked remotely, but a 33% actually no, none of the staff have ever done so. So that's a really interesting perspective, especially if everybody's new to doing remote work. And then what's happened since you transitioned? For 33% of you, no changes, and 22% say, I have more staff working remotely now than they had before. So there's some changes. So thanks. I'm going to stop sharing those results, but you should see those results. Can everybody see my slides? I think I have that on share mode. Jenny, can you confirm?
Yeah, I can see it. Michelle said she could see it. Yeah. Yep,
Okay,
a few
great.
people can see it. Yeah.
Thank you. I do not have access to the chat, so I do have my assistants, Jenny and Diane, who are on the call as well. Our intent of creating these webinars is to help managers, HR professional, and business owners to help with some of the tough decisions you're making in managing the spread of COVID-19. So we're planning to do bi-weekly 30-minute sessions. Today is the second in the series. We will be doing them on Mondays at 11 and Wednesdays at 3. So we've done that poll now, and it is anonymous and just gives us some understanding of where people are with respect to the topic today. I've allotted 30 minutes because I'm cognizant of everybody's time. And the way we'll do it is for 20 minutes, I will do a presentation at a high level with some of the legislative impacts, but really my goal is to focus on making you think about some of the questions that you have, some of the tips and strategies that you need to do to carry out business. And that's my goal, is really helping you carry out business and make some sense of the changes that are happening. The balance, the 10 minutes, will be for questions. So I encourage you to put your questions into the chat box. So again, you pop up your tab either at the bottom or the top of your computer and you'll see chat, and put it in, and you can address it to everybody, or if you want to just address it privately, address it to Jenny, because she will be asking me the questions at the end. We're aware that some questions, people may have more questions, and if you have time, we ourselves will stay online for an additional 15 minutes to answer any additional questions. At the end of the presentation, we will be sending an email to everybody who registered for today's event. That will give you a link to a YouTube of the recording of this presentation, a copy of the PDF slides from today's event, a link to a calendar for 30-minute free consultation. I encourage people who really have more questions, who want to talk to me, to do this, and I'm happy to offer that service. And the last thing is to respond to a survey that we have. We want to make sure that our ongoing topics are relevant to you, and any input that you have would really be helpful. So let me get going with the presentation. So what's the current situation? The current situation is people are having difficulty with the situation of COVID-19 is constantly changing. Schools now, instead of being just closed for several weeks, the government is saying schools will not open on April 6th. And social distancing, a new term that we never used before, at least in my understanding, has now become a normal everyday occurrence and an expectation. And the emphasis now is that it has to be practiced. People were commenting on the radio and the TV set saying, I still see people playing, ball hockey outside. I still see people doing group walks. That's not social distancing. And I recall a person who we were having a virtual meeting say, oh yeah, next week I'll have my son and his friends. So I said, well, actually, play dates are not part of social distancing. So he said, okay, I will have my son and no play dates. The government legislation now has created a state of emergency in all 10 provinces. Up to Sunday, there were 9. Nova Scotia declared on Sunday that they would now create a state of emergency. And our government in Ontario, for those who are listening, essentially said on March 23rd that they will be closing all doors except for essential services, and created a list that we found out yesterday morning. And as of midnight, 2 days ago, and as of midnight last night, we now are in essential services only mode. So this means a lot of tough decisions for you as businesses. Who can and who needs to work remotely, who's not working remotely, layoffs, work share program, reduced hours, and closed businesses. With all that, how are we going to survive? So the webinar series was presented to answer that need, to help you as managers, business owners, and HR professionals. And as I said earlier, providing tips, information, and strategies to help with the tough decisions that we must be making. Just a tiny bit about myself. I am the founder and president of People Bright Consulting and the creator of Connect with RevUp. My background is in human resources, as well as my husband and I founded an engineering company, which had started with 2 people, went to 125 in 7 offices across Canada. We created what we felt would be a special workplace where people were cared and valued to build their capabilities. So we actually became recognized as one of the top 10 of the best workplaces in Canada. Human resources is something that's near and dear to me. So when I sold the company back in about 10 years ago now, I did start my company, People Bright Consulting. My expertise is in the healthcare field, in engineering, IT, and human resources. So what we want to cover today is really talking about the pros and cons of working remotely. What are those advantages? What are some of the concerns? And should your business work remotely? The second thing I want to cover is managing effective communications through technology. There are strategies on communicating effectively using technology and using different methods to reach the right crowd and work with your team. The third thing is to create positive online relationships working remotely. And how do you manage your team in a positive way that engages them? And I'm going to share a little bit about the Connect with RevUp approach that I mentioned that I created. The fourth thing is maintaining productivity and supervision. I think people naturally think about, oh, we're going to go virtual. Here are the things that I'm worried about. So I'm going to kind of get you to put your thinking caps on and be a bit more creative and share ideas. When we get to that section, I would encourage people on the chat to write down some of the strategies that they've been using so that others can see. And the last thing is to get you to think about, what will you do after COVID-19? People now have this basically a huge pilot project on working remotely, and being in it for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or even longer, people will now have a feel for what that's like. Technology now allows people to connect anywhere, anytime, to anyone in the world from almost any device. This is dramatically changing the way people work, facilitating 24/7 collaboration with colleagues who are dispersed across time zones, countries, and continents. And this was a quote from Michael Dell. What that means is that technology has allowed us to work remotely. For those that you were part of SARS in in 2000 and, sorry, for those of you who were part of SARS and forgot the year now, but the technology was not as robust as it is now. And so the ability to work remotely from home was not as possible as it is today. So what are some of the pros and the cons of working remotely? When people were starting to work remotely on a basis based on COVID-19, I heard things about, well, how are we going to supervise them? How they won't be productive. They'll be less productive. I'm worried about whether they'll get the work done. I don't know how to supervise properly. So a lot of worries about whether people will get the work done and whether we can. And what I want to share is that I think this is a different time. With COVID-19, we are giving permission for ourselves to be a bit different. So let me focus on just in general, and then I'll focus on what COVID-19 did to the pros and cons argument about remote work. The pro would be productivity and flexibility. Flexible hours and locations. People can work from home and they can kind of be more flexible on their hours, and there's less distractions. The cooler is not there, so people can't be getting up and having conversations, and so that time would be not spent in being more productive. There's the time and cost efficiency, that you're not spending time commuting now, so you're saving money, you're finished work earlier, so you can actually have a little bit more quality time. Studies have shown that people who have worked from home for remote purposes actually feel a sense of more flexibility and want to stay at current employers because they've got a good thing going. The employment satisfaction, really, they feel an increased set of engagement and a motivation to do work because they have a little bit more sense of control in their work life. And that gives rise to a healthier lifestyle where there is a bit more work-life balance and a little bit more stress relief. Having said that, some of the actual pros can also be cons, because some people would say that productivity is a con, because people may not be more accountable. They may have distractions from home. There's less opportunity to collaborate. If you have less opportunity to collaborate, then there's less decisions that really take into account a wider perspective of decision making. And when they say you work as a team, sometimes you get a better product and a better result in the end. So those are some of the concerns that way. The cost. Some people didn't even have laptops. So how are people going to work remotely from home? I remember my son, he's a game developer. He had to bring home a special laptop because he develops games. He had to bring home this huge Mac with a screen that was like, I don't know, it's like what, 30 inches wide, maybe 25, but it was huge. So he had to get an Uber to help transport that home. So it's a huge thing because he needs that. But many companies were caught that they didn't have people who had laptops. They only had their computer at work. Another con, and I think this is a very legitimate con, particularly with COVID-19, is that you have to have an IT infrastructure that supports the ability to work remotely. You have to have networking, and you have to have security of that networking. So some companies may not even had that. And I remember those first few days that because so many people are working at home now, that the connections on the internet were not as secure, because it's not necessarily designed for people to be working remotely from home. The last thing is that potential for hackers. Many companies talk about the fact that they get hacked at work. Now they have people who are dialing in through VPN or just dialing in through Zoom, and there is opportunities for people to inadvertently be hacked because they've exposed their company now to people's home-based solutions. As I said, pro was healthier lifestyles. I also say the con would be social isolation. People are really concerned about being isolated and there's a lack of team engagement. And then the very last thing is the supervision. People are concerned, how will I be able to supervise people who are less experienced? And what about the face time that is lacking? So COVID-19 came along and many of us started to work remotely more often. Some of the observations I've made was, one, I think it's an alternate work style that there was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I find that but people who work from home usually have create that professional look as they're connecting with people. And what I found now is that as I'm having Zoom calls with clients who are now working from home and had it, there is a little bit more of a relaxation. Where some of us are working multiple people at home, and so people are more tolerant and flexible that it's not going to be a professional work environment uh, always, because in my home, there's 4 of us working remotely. So we are trying to make sure that we have our space to work, but our house wasn't geared towards 4 people working remotely. So I think people are more adaptable and flexible. I've seen children who are on their break from school and they are, you know, talking to their parents or interrupting minimally, but it's a welcomed interruption now. We are more flexible. People are learning technology. People who even work remotely at home are now starting to go into Skype, Zoom, or WebEx for virtual meetings. Some learning it for the first time. Others are now embracing project organizers because you're working at a distance. And some of those are Asana, Trello, Salesforce. And then the communication programs on phones and computers like Slack and WhatsApp and just even Google Messenger. People are starting to be creative, and some of the things that I want to share of creativity is I heard one day this one company has exercises in their organization, so they've created virtual exercises in the workplace so you can zoom in and everybody can exercise together. Another idea is that we don't have opportunity to socialize. So maybe you create a Zoom meeting where you say, hey guys, it's 5 o'clock. Anybody who wants to come on, go grab your beer, go grab your nuts or your pizza, and let's meet at 5 and we just have, social half hour before we quit for the night. Others are doing, you'll see more blogs and webinars, maybe almost inundated with them on the email. It's teaching people to learn how to manage remotely. And one of the concerns that I want to share is webcams. Apparently the schools were saying that the children have to be having their webcam on, but some kids were actually not aware and they were changing their clothes. So suddenly they said, okay, no webcam. And I think the same thing for companies. Some companies are making their staff be on webcam so they can watch every minute of every day. What message are you sending when you do that to your workforce? So certainly that's something that I would not recommend you doing, but I want to kind of share learning new skills to positively manage the workforce, motivate them, and look at outcomes. And then new habits. Like anything, when you do something for 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, it becomes a habit. So this is your opportunity to create new habits for working remotely. And if you're a manager or you're the business owner or HR professionals, you have the ability to set that. 5 tips I want to share with you for respectfully keeping remote team members accountable is, first of all, establish expectations early on. When you have a project or you have an expectation, share with that team or the team members what you expect them to do. So if you say, I would like you to work on this client and I want you to deliver the project report to me by Friday. Let's check in on Wednesday. You're managing those expectations. Streamline your communication practices. Rather than sending emails every 5 minutes, have a certain time where you send them and store a few, because people can't be sitting on their emails and trying to get work done. It really reduces productivity. So create some understanding for yourself and for your team how you're going to communicate and how frequently that is. Schedule meetings appropriately. I know myself, I schedule a meeting first thing in the morning with my team or members of my team to discuss what we're going to do during that day and what the timeline is. My son has regular meetings with his teams on certain days as well. So if you have meetings that need to proceed, try to schedule them at appropriate times. I mentioned the use of project management and communication tools, and set some ground rules on how you want to do that. We ourselves use WhatsApp or just Messenger to do just quick little questions, but we use our Google Drive to communicate more larger projects of information that we're going to share. And then get together at least twice a year, and this is like this article that was developed by John Eads, twice a year to really kind of check in with people on a different basis. I want to highlight, I see it's 3:24, just got a few more slides. I want to share, how do you maintain positive relations with people? Working remotely is hard, but the advantage is with technology where you can see people face to face, even FaceTime, it really helps to keep that connection going. An approach that I found successful when my husband and I had our own company was really treating people with respect. And by treating people with respect, you actually build trust. And when you build trust, then people want to do more. They feel that you care about them. So here's what RevUp stands for. RevUp stands for respect, equality, valued, uniqueness, and potential. And the approach that I share is, if you treat people with respect, you will build trust. If you treat people with equality, that means you have open, honest communications. You treat people's roles as equally important to yourself. And when you value people, then they feel that they want to do more. They feel part of the team. So the first three values are really important to create inclusiveness, to create trust, loyalty, and a desire to do more. The other two is about uniqueness and potential. When I talk about uniqueness, I say, look at people's strengths and really use those strengths rather than build on what they're not good at. Look at what they're unique in and really foster that. And when you do that, you really tap into their potential. And that, again, will create a positive workforce and engagement. The other point I want to do is talk about acknowledging difficulties and fears. Each one of us is coping in different ways. For those people who like change, this adaptability is not so bad. But for those who've been used to routine, the constant changes in the workplace, in society, is really making them anxious. So recognize the different ways people cope and really help them to cope as best as possible. How do you maintain productivity? Well, as I mentioned before, create a routine and get creative. Sometimes you can have team meetings, you can do lunch meetings, and combine a bit of work and pleasure. Some companies, it's totally work, totally get that. But where you guys have a more casual relationship, spend maybe the first 3 minutes just catching up on how people are doing, how people are feeling, and then dive into the work. When you're working from home, do dress the part, and tongue-in-cheek, from the top up. Some people will kind of want to wander around in their pajamas, and you hear that as you read it. But from the top up, dress. And some people will say, if I dress down, I'm not as productive. When I dress up, I feel like I need to do work. And so dress in a place that will keep you productive. Some people will have morning meetings, and I think trying to have some work habits really creates a sense of normalcy amongst the craziness. If you've got family, budget time for them in the midst of your day. Establish some ground rules. using different forms of connectivity effectively. So as I mentioned, know when you want to use email, know when you want to use things like WhatsApp or Slack, and try to create that work-life balance. Remember, you're not commuting anymore. So are you converting the commute time to having some healthy stretch breaks, or are you just working harder? So keep that in mind. What will you do after COVID-19? As I said, people will be working anywhere from 3-4 weeks and longer. We don't even want to think about how long, but it's going to be a quote, as long as it takes. So you're going to need to think about, are people going to continue to work remotely? And does that make sense for your business? What about employee satisfaction? Once they've had this opportunity, do they want to continue this? So that's a factor that you will need to take into account. And you may want to have a team meeting to find out, hey, how's it going? What do people think? Because I'm trying to plan for the future and I want to see how this working remotely is doing. If you don't already have policies and procedures about working remotely from home, you should develop them, particularly if you will continue this after COVID-19. And I think COVID-19 is really allowing every organization to foster a better work culture, building trust. It's allowing people to rethink the processes that they have, and it's giving us all permission to make changes. So as you're trying to make decisions about anything, but we're focusing on remote work, think about what new and evolved processes you might be making, what shifts you might be making to your business. If you do go remotely, you may not need leasing and space as much. And so think about the timing of your lease renewal and what that means, and whatever operational costs this will have. So that's my presentation. I'm encouraging Jenny to take the questions that you have for the chat line. These are some of the presentations we have upcoming. We have a few more lined up, but we want to see what you would like to hear from us. And we also want to be cognizant of the legislation changes. So we do have our first 5 up. We do have other ones that will be coming. Effective communication really talks about how do you send the right messages to clients and your staff. So do join me for that. EP4, business survival. We'll get down and deep on thinking about, what does this mean? How am I going to survive? Can I last 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? That's what I'm going to be talking about. A change leadership talks about the fact that we are making transformational change, but transformational change is dependent on leadership. So I want to help you guys think about effective leadership. Jenny, do you want to, we have any questions right now?
So far, we don't have any. So if everyone, if you would want to share your questions, please write it on the chat, or you could also personal message me if you want to share the questions anonymously. Thank you.
Right. So this is my contact information. I am offering a complimentary 30-minute one-on-one consultation for anybody who really has questions that they want to ask personally, or just spend a little bit more time in general about this whole, what does this mean for my business? I am an HR expert, but I also am a strategic operations experienced business owner, because we did grow our company to 125 and I was essentially the COO. You'll see here there's a Calendly link, and again we will be sending you after this presentation a copy of the Calendly link to book a schedule session with me, as well as the PDF and a copy of the slides. Have any questions popped up, Jenny?
No, not yet.
Okay, well, I appreciate everybody's time today. I think it's just getting you to think about working remotely. I think it's an opportunity now for you to connect with people, and this is one way of connecting when we're having a social distance. Do encourage you to sign in for some of the other topics, and thank you for joining us today.